seen as one of the most important works in aviation history. 62. He also produced a series of hang gliders including batwing, monoplane and biplane forms, such as the Dewitzer glider and normal soaring apparatus, which is considered to be the first airplane in series production, making the masculine fabric Otto. Lilienthal, the first airplane production company in the world. 63. Starting in 1891, he became the first person to make controlled untethered glides routinely, and the first Taube photographed flying a heavier-than-air machine, stimulating interest around the world. Lilienthal's work led to him developing the concept of the modern wing. 64. 65. His flights in the year 1891 are seen as the beginning of human flight. 66. And because of that he is often referred to as either the father of aviation, 67, 68, 69, or father of flight. 70. He rigorously documented his work, including photographs, and for this reason is one of the best known of early pioneers. Lilienthal made over 2,000 glides until his death in 1896 from injuries sustained in a glider crash. Picking up where Lilienthal left off, Octave Charnout took up aircraft design after an early retirement, and funded the development of several gliders. In the summer of 1896, his team flew several of their designs, eventually deciding that the best was a biplane design. Like Lilienthal, he documented and photographed this work. In Britain, Percy Pilcher, who had worked for Maxim, built and successfully flew several gliders during the mid to late 1890s. The invention of the box kite during this period by the Australian Lawrence Hargrave would lead to the development of the practical biplane. In 1894, Hargrave linked 4 of his kites together, added a sling seat and was the first to obtain lift with a heavier-than-air aircraft, when he flew up 16 feet, 4.9 m. Later pioneers of manned kite flying included Samuel Franklin Cody in England and Captain Jeanie Sarkany in France. Frost. William Frost from Pembrokeshire, Wales started his project in 1880 and after 16 years, he designed a flying machine and in 1894 won a patent for a Frost aircraft glider. Reports say witnesses claimed the craft flew at Saundersfoot in 1896, traveling 500 yards before colliding with a tree and falling in a field. 71. Langley. First failure of Langley's manned aerodrome on the Potomac River, 7 October 1903. After a distinguished career in astronomy and shortly before becoming secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, Samuel Pierpont Langley started a serious investigation into aerodynamics at what is today the University of Pittsburgh. In 1891, he published experiments in aerodynamics detailing his research, and then turned to building his designs. He hoped to achieve automatic aerodynamic stability, so he gave little consideration to in-flight control. 72. On the 6th of May, 1896, Langley's Aerodrome No. 5 made the first successful sustained flight of an unpiloted, engine-driven heavier-than-air craft of substantial size. It was launched from a spring-actuated catapult mounted on top of a houseboat on the Potomac River near Quantico, Virginia. 2 flights were made that afternoon, one of 1,005 meters, 3,297 feet, and a second of 700 meters, 2,300 feet, at a speed of approximately 25 miles per hour, 40 kilometers per hour. On both occasions, the Aerodrome No. 5 landed in the water as planned because, in order to save weight, it was not equipped with landing gear. On the 28th of November, 1896, another successful flight was made with the Aerodrome No. 6. This flight, of 1,460 meters, 4,790 feet, was witnessed and photographed by Alexander Graham Bell. The Aerodrome No. 6 was actually Aerodrome No. 4 greatly modified. So little remained of the original aircraft that it was given a new designation. With the successes of the Aerodrome number 5 and number 6, Langley started looking for funding to build a full-scale man-carrying version of his designs. Spurred by the Spanish-American War, the U.S. government granted him $50,000 to develop a man-carrying flying machine for aerial reconnaissance. Langley planned on building a scaled-up version known as the Aerodrome, and started with the smaller quarter-scale Aerodrome, which flew twice on the 18th of June, 1901, and then again with a newer and more powerful engine in 1903. With the basic design apparently successfully tested, he then turned to the problem of a suitable engine. He contracted Stephen Balzer to build one, but was disappointed when it delivered only 8 HP, 6.0 kilowatts, instead of the 12 HP, 8.9 kilowatts, he expected. Langley's assistant, Charles M. Manley, then reworked the design into a 5-cylinder water-cooled radial that delivered 52 HP, 39 kilowatts, at 950 RPM, a feat that took years to duplicate. Now with both power and a design, Langley put the two together with great hopes. To his dismay, the resulting aircraft proved to be too fragile. Simply scaling up the original small models resulted in a design that was too weak to hold itself together. 2 launches in late 1903 both ended with Aerodrome immediately crashing into the water. The pilot, Manley, was rescued each time. Also, the aircraft's control system was inadequate to allow quick pilot responses, and it had no method of lateral control, and the Aerodrome's aerial stability was marginal. 72. Langley's attempts to gain further funding failed, and his efforts ended. 9 days after his second abortive launch on the 8th of December, the Wright brothers successfully flew their flyer. Glenn Curtiss made 93 modifications to the Aerodrome and flew this very different aircraft in 1914. 72. Without acknowledging the modifications, the Smithsonian Institution asserted that Langley's Aerodrome was the first machine capable of flight. 73. Whitehead. Gustav Weisskopf was a German who emigrated to the U.S., where he soon changed his name to Whitehead. From 1897 to 1915, he designed and built only flying machines and engines. On 14 August 1901, 2.5 years before the Wright brothers' flight, he claimed to have carried out a controlled powered flight in his number 21 monoplane at Fairfield, Connecticut. The flight was reported in the Bridgeport Sunday Herald local newspaper. About 30 years later, several people questioned by a researcher claimed to have seen that all other Whitehead flights. In March 2013, Jane's All the World's Aircraft, an authoritative source for contemporary aviation, published an editorial which accepted Whitehead's flight as the first manned, powered, controlled flight of a heavier-than-air craft. 74. The Smithsonian Institution, custodians of the original Wright flyer, and many aviation historians continue to maintain that Whitehead did not fly. As suggested. 75. 76. Pearce. Richard Pearce was a New Zealand farmer and inventor who performed pioneering aviation experiments. Witnesses interviewed many years afterward claimed that Pearce flew and landed a powered heavier-than-air machine on the 31st of March, 1903, 9 months before the Wright brothers flew. 77. 2130. Documentary evidence for these claims remains open to interpretation and dispute, and Pearce himself never made such claims. In a newspaper interview in 1909, he said he did not attempt anything practical until 1904. 78. If he did fly in 1903, the flight appears to have been poorly controlled in comparison to the Wrights. Wright brothers. The Wright Flyer, the first sustained flight with a powered, controlled aircraft using a methodical approach and concentrating on the controllability of the aircraft, the brothers built and tested a series of kite and glider designs from 1898 to 1902 before attempting to build a powered design. The gliders worked, but not as well as the Wrights had expected based on the experiments and writings of their predecessors. Their first full-size glider, launched in 1900, had only about half the lift they anticipated. Their second glider, built the following year, performed even more poorly. Rather than giving up, the Wrights constructed their own wind tunnel and created a number of sophisticated devices to measure lift and drag on the 200-wing designs they tested. 79. As a result, the Wrights corrected earlier mistakes in calculations regarding drag and lift. Their testing and calculating produced a third glider with a higher aspect ratio and true 3-axis control. They flew it successfully hundreds of times in 1902, and it performed far better than the previous models. By using a rigorous system of experimentation, involving wind tunnel testing of airfoils and flight testing of full-size prototypes, the Wrights not only built a working aircraft the following year, the Wright Flyer, but also helped advance the science of aeronautical engineering. The Wrights appear to be the first to make serious studied attempts to simultaneously solve the power and control problems. Both problems proved difficult, but they never lost interest. They solved the control problem by inventing wing warping for roll control, combined with simultaneous yaw control with a steerable rear rudder. Almost as an afterthought, they designed and built a low-powered internal combustion engine. They also designed and carved wooden propellers that were more efficient than any before, enabling them to gain adequate performance from their low engine power. Although wing warping as a means of lateral control was used only briefly during the early history of aviation, the principle of combining lateral control in combination with a rudder was a key advance in aircraft control. While many aviation pioneers appeared to leave safety largely to chance, the Wrights' design was greatly influenced with the need to teach themselves to fly without unreasonable risk to life and limb, by surviving crashes. His emphasis, as well as low engine power, was the reason for low flying speed and for taking off in a headwind. Performance, rather than safety, was the reason for the rear-heavy design because the canard could not be highly loaded, and headroll wings were less affected by crosswinds and were consistent with the low yaw stability. According to the Smithsonian Institution and Federation Aeronautique International, FAI, 82-83, the Wrights made the first sustained, controlled, powered heavier-than-air manned flight at Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina, 4 miles, 8 kilometers, south of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on 17 December 1903. 84. The first flight by Orville Wright, of 120 feet, 37 m, in 12 seconds, was recorded in a famous photograph. In the fourth flight of the same day, Wilbur Wright flew 852 feet, 260 m, in 59 seconds. The flights were witnessed by 3 coastal life-saving crewmen, a local businessman, and a boy from the village, making these the first public flights and the first well-documented ones. 84. Orville described the final flight of the day. The first few hundred feet were up and down, as before, but by the time 300 feet had been covered, the machine was under much better control. The course for the next 400 or 500 feet had but little undulation. However, when out about 800 feet the machine began pitching again, and, in one of its darts downward, struck the ground. The distance over the ground was measured to be 852 feet, 260 m. The time of the flight was 59 seconds. The frame supporting the front rudder was badly broken, but the main part of the machine was not injured at all. We estimated that the machine could be put in condition for flight again in about a day or two. 85. They flew only about 10 feet above the ground as a safety precaution, so they had little room to maneuver, and a few flights in the gusty winds ended in a bumpy and unintended landing. Modern analysis by Professor. Within weeks of the first powered flight, this Ohio newspaper described what the Wright brothers' invention has accomplished after years of glider tests. 4 successful flights in a powered flyer that has no balloon attachments of any kind, but is supported in the air by a pair of aerocurves, or wings, placing Santos Dumont and Le Bourdais, with 2 dirigible balloons, in Eclipse. 80. This 1906 article describes how the Wrights' experiments were conducted in strict secrecy for several years, with not more than a dozen persons being in on the secret. 81. One insider stated that the brothers had not sought for spectacular success, and instead described their progressive accumulation of experiences, including gradual progression from gliders to powered flight, and from straight flights to circuits requiring turning the aeroplane. 81. The account reported some slight success in flying through the air at the end of summer of 1903. 81. The Wrights were said to have solved flight control issues to achieve controlled turns on a 1-mile circuit on 20 September 1904, followed by 5-minute flights in the ensuing weeks and a 24-mile, 38-minute flight in summer 1905. 81. Freddie C. Kulick and Henry R. Rex, 1985, has demonstrated that the 1903 Wright flyer was so unstable as to be almost unmanageable by anyone but the Wrights, who had trained themselves in the 1902 glider. 86. The Wrights continued flying at Huffman Prairie near Dayton, Ohio in 1904-05. In May 1904 they introduced the Flyer 2, a heavier and improved version of the original Flyer. On the 23rd of June 1905, they first flew a third machine, the Flyer 3. After a severe crash on the 14th of July 1905, they rebuilt the Flyer 3 and made important design changes. They almost doubled the size of the elevator and rudder and moved them about twice the distance from the wings. They added 2 fixed vertical vanes, called blinkers, between the elevators and gave the wings a very slight dihedral. They disconnected the rudder from the wing warping control, and as in all future aircraft, placed it on a separate control handle. When flights resumed, the results were immediate. The serious pitch instability that hampered Flyers I and II was significantly reduced, so repeated minor crashes were eliminated. Flights with the redesigned Flyer 3 started lasting over 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. Flyer 3 became the first practical aircraft, though without wheels and needing a launching device, flying consistently under full control and bringing its pilot back to the starting point safely and landing without damage. On the 5th of October, 1905, Wilbur flew 24 miles, 39 kilometers, in 39 minutes 23 seconds. 87. According to the April 1907 issue of the Scientific American magazine, 88, the Wright brothers seemed to have the most advanced knowledge of heavier-than-air navigation at the time. However, the same magazine issue also claimed that no public flight had been made in the United States before its April 1907 issue. Hence, they devised the Scientific American Aeronautic Trophy in order to encourage the development of a heavier-than-air flying machine. Glenn H. Curtis won the trophy in 1908 with the first pre-announced and officially recorded flight of the June bug. 89. Pioneer Era, 1903-1914. This period saw the development of practical aeroplanes and airships and their early application, alongside balloons and kites, for private, sport and military use. Pioneers in Europe. The 14 bis, or Oishio de Proie biplane. Although full details of the Wright brothers' system of flight control had been published in El Aerophile in January 1906, The importance of this advance was not recognized, and European experimenters generally concentrated on attempting to produce inherently stable machines. Short-powered flights were performed in France by Romanian engineer Trian Vuer on the 18th of March and the